Morning, Jamie.
Morning, how are you?
Doing great. Yourself?
I'm doing great. Yeah, it's been a busy year already, but happy to, keep moving forward.
Yeah, that's all we can do, really.
Yeah, it's just amazing how, as you get older, you think that you're going to have more time, and it's never that way.
Oh, it seems to be going faster than
Right?
than when we were younger. Yeah,
hmm But it's all good.
yeah. Just gotta live life to its fullest.
Yeah, that's very true. How are you doing?
The same, busy always. There's never a dull moment.
Yeah, legislatively too, lots of stuff going on.
Yeah, yeah. That and of course, the board and then all these other extracurricular stuff that the board's involved.
Life gets involved, right?
Yeah, yeah. But it's better than just sitting around doing nothing. So
I agree. I love to be busy.
yeah, but you
Probably
said
a little too much.
yeah.
I said I love to be busy, but probably a little bit too much.
Yeah, we're not getting that chance to smell the roses anymore. So it'd be
I
nice to
know,
do
I
that.
think about that.
Yeah.
It seems like before technology, we were expected to do a lot less because we didn't have the technology, but now we have technology and everything's almost instantaneous that
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, it just don't get it very. You
Yeah.
get things so quickly that you're reacting to things quicker, and so you get more things, it seems like.
Things don't have to wait till the next day.
Exactly. hmm And as we get more AI stuff going on, I'm kind of interested to see how that's gonna affect everybody.
Yeah, then we got to figure things out on the next steps on career paths and stuff like that. So
Yeah, that's really gonna change because I know I was talking with my kid's dentist and orthodontist, and they're already utilizing AI things.
yeah. Yeah.
Um, so the different technologies for making retainers and making brackets and
Well, just
like
healthcare decisions in general. I mean, I
that's true.
understand radiologists are also being replaced by AI.
Yeah. Although I do have one of my dentists says that AI cannot identify cavities as well as he can. So I guess there's still that.
Well, I mean, you do a scan, right? And AI will probably detect it before a human would.
This is
Um,
true.
it's hard to say. I mean, my kid he broke two fingers in his left hand couple of years ago.
Oh no.
And took him to the ER. They took an X-ray and they identified one, and my son had to identify the other one, right?
Wow. Isn't that
So
wild?
yeah, whereas AI probably would have detected the breaks if there was a bent in the finger or something of that nature. But so he points to the X-ray. He's like, "Oh, let me show you the X-ray." And they showed him the X-ray. They show him his broken finger, and they're like, Isn't that one broken too?" And they're like, "Oh yeah, it is broken."
Yeah. I mean, we talk about healthcare that way all the time, right? And how they one always treat the numbers and not necessarily just the patient too, because you have to treat the patient too.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that gets missed a lot.
Well,
So hopefully they can get better at that. And
yeah.
then, like, even when my daughter had cancer, like, I had taken her to two different pediatricians, and they just said, oh, it's allergies, it's swimmer's ear. It's always
Yeah.
something
Yeah.
different. And it wasn't until she had hydrocephalus and she was having severe
Mm,
side effects. And I took her to the emergency room and they did an MRI and said, she had brain cancer. So it was just, there's so many things that get missed because we don't,
yeah.
look at the patient. We don't have the
Oh, no.
conversations.
And that's a complex situation. It can get pretty serious pretty quickly. Mine was related to my A1C. I got a strong family history. Um, and I had to beg and plead the doctors to just do an A1C, because they didn't want to do it.
That's just
Oh,
wild to
it
me.
is. And it's a simple test. It takes what, a couple of minutes because everything is like finger prick. You just throw it in there, it tells you what your A1C is. I'm like, what's the big deal? You know?
Yeah.
And
And I
because
mean,
yeah,
similar to that, I had a friend who 8 months ago asked for an MRI because she was having symptoms.
yeah.
They denied the MRI. She starts chemotherapy on Friday because she has metastasized cancer now.
So who do you sue now? Who's responsible?
Right? I don't know. I mean,
That's the whole
it's
thing.
just, yeah, it's just they have to start listening, right? I
Yeah,
think the
yeah.
active listening and the time that's given for
Hmm.
assessments, they're just looking at numbers. But they're not assessing the patient and they're
Yeah,
not giving the time to have those conversations.
yeah.
Um, and I think that's where, we come in a lot of times and give advice. But,
Hmm.
you know, even at that, you can give advice, you can ask the questions, and they still deny
Oh yeah,
it.
absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah. It
Yeah,
will be interesting.
healthcare's a little bit of a joke right now.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that AI really kind of can change that dynamic and
Opens
maybe
it up,
give
yeah.
us,
Opens it up.
yeah. Hmm.
No,
So,
we can just hope for the best, you know?
yeah, keep working towards it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
What's going on, Tariq? How's your life going, buddy?
I'm living the dream.
That's good. That's good. We
Can
were just
we join
talking,
you?
we were just talking about our dreams and
You wish,
they
you
weren't
wish.
so pretty. Yeah.
It's difficult time.
Yeah.
Cam, I lost my border pharmacy background for the meetings. Did you? Not today. Whenever you have time, if you can send me,
All right. I got to start charging you for those.
be my guest.
That could be a lucrative side gig.
Yes, it would. All right. Let's see if I can get that to you. Yeah, I might chat up, so give me a while. Okay, yeah. Your thing. So you've got YouTube up. You got YouTube up. Yeah. Well, I don't have YouTube up. Oh, that's right. Let me. You want to do yours? Okay. Yep, and I'm letting people in, so. Cool. We're good to go. Good. Thank you. Should be in your inbox, Tarek.
Thank you, Cam. I look for it.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Cam, how you doing?
Doing great yourself.
Doing well.
You have a worker behind you, huh?
I have one of the interns. This is his
Nice.
last day for rotation.
Can I see his hands? Does he have calluses from all the work you've given him?
It's on his tips of his fingers. It's all the typing.
Well, hopefully you had a great time with Roger. I'm sure you learned a lot.
Kim, I think we're good on quorum at least.
Yeah, let me take roll call. Michelle Almer says she's running behind. She's just getting out of
Yeah,
the meeting right now.
she sent me a text too.
But if you're okay with it, Miss Wamsley, I will take roll call real quick.
All right, we'll call the meeting to order at 9:01. This is the Arizona Board of Pharmacy Rule Writing Task Force.
Perfect. Miss Wamsley,
Present. No conflicts.
Mr. Board,
I'm here.
Miss Nair,
Okay.
Mr. Dang. Mr. Dang, Mr. Pond,
Here.
Miss Howe,
Here.
okay, and Jamie, are you standing in for Jake Sports?
Yes, I'm standing in for Jake today.
Yeah, make note of that. Mr. Bozen? Mr. Bozen? Roger?
I'm here.
All right, Michelle's gonna be late. Bina,
Here.
Tarek,
Here, no conflict.
and Garrett. We have 4 absents, Madam Chair. All others accounted for. We also have board staff on the call, myself, I think Jennifer, Gail Navong's on. Mr. Leong, are you there?
Yes, sir, I'm here.
All right, Mr. Castaneda. Ben?
Yeah, I'm here.
All right, and Max Jacobson. And I believe we also have our AAG, Gene Galvin on. I think we're good to go, Madam Chair.
Terrific. I think we want to go ahead and start. I guess just for the record, does anybody have any conflicts of interest they'd like to disclose? I have none.
None.
What would be considered a conflict? Like, I work for a company that does compounding.
I think it's a general practice discussion, so I don't know that it would benefit one company versus another. Cam, I'll take your direction or Gene's.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, if you're just working for a compounding pharmacy, that's one matter. If you're actually representing an association and on an employee of an association, that's sole purpose is to challenge the board, challenge FDA, challenge USP, that may be a different matter. So as long as you guys are not one of those in the subject matter we're talking about today, I think we should be good. And correct me if I'm wrong, Ms. Galvin.
I agree with your position.
And I do see
Thank you.
Mr. Bozen on the call. Mark?
Yes, present.
All right.
Sorry, I'm late.
No, it's all
Thank
right.
you. All right, so I guess that brings us to, do we want to start with compounding? You provided the red line. I don't know if you want to go ahead and display that on the screen
will.
from where we
Yeah.
stopped at the last meeting. I'll let you take over, Dr. Gundy, to walk through what we need to talk about.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And are you all able to see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Yes.
Perfect, perfect. I don't think the first page is an issue. We did adjust the language to have the right reference information on it to be legitimate with Arizona code. So that should be okay. We'll still continue to maybe tweak a little bit, but not substantive, just grammatical errors or whatever, if there's any. Page 2, I think we went through it last time. We didn't have any concerns with that either. I think we came to consensus. Page 3, I did add something. I wanted to open it up for discussion. I know this was kind of like a touchy situation for at least me and maybe others. But the professional judgment component of a pharmacist when they're compounding, I still kind of feel that we should try to contain it a little bit. I understand there's allergens out there and substances that are not identified by the FDA, and people are testing for those. So I added this language, which adds more words, but I think it captures, it may need some wordsmithing slightly here and there, but I think it says you can still exercise professional judgment for items that are not on the list for the FDA. For instance, allergens and other substances. But if it's on the FDA list to be allowed to compound, the entity has to be registered with the FDA, and if it's in this state or jurisdiction, it has to be licensed by the Board of Pharmacy. And I think that creates some parameters around at least the FDA approved products to compound.
I think this makes sense to me, Cam. Thoughts from the others?
Can I ask a question? Can we go up above where you're at right now? And start with, so D1, I think there might have been a typo just in the first sentence, just above where you're at. Above A.
Above A.
It looks like it's been corrected. It had the word her instead of here.
Gotcha.
Then the other thing was regarding how this was written. It read to me like a policy because I didn't see anything that was specifically saying you may or you shall. It didn't read like it was a requirement. It read more like an SOP. And I didn't know if we're intentionally trying to leave it that way or.
This
Like
part
if
right
you-
here, you're talking about what we just talked about?
No, just above where it starts off. The topic here, right back where we were on 1. Okay, so all substances for compounding that are received, stored, or used by the pharmacy permittee shall. Shouldn't shall be there or may or whatever language we're wanting to use.
Yeah, if we put shall at the end, shall our drug, and then goes into A, we may need to wordsmith it. Obviously, B, it shall meet, which would, and then shall compounds so we may have to do a different opening for each, but is there any objection to add shall at the end there?
Is it covered by the D above where it says shall ensure compliance with this section? I'm not an attorney, so I don't know if that applies.
I think you can assume that that applies. It
Mhm.
also says, all substances used by, they are drug substances that are components. They meet the standards. C's a little funky as far as, matching verb tense and all of that needs to be reworked, but inserting shall and reworking that would, could make it a little bit more clear. I don't think it's absolutely necessary, but if we can improve it, then that's something we should work on.
And then back to the section you were at, I didn't know what as applicable meant in the last sentence.
Yeah, I don't know if we can put as applicable legally anyways, but I'd leave it up to the legal minds on that one.
I think the intention there was to still allow those types of substances where they're the only substances that are available, but trying to limit it to the FDA approved substances, but knowing like things like the allergen extracts aren't FDA approved.
The attorneys in the room, would as applicable be an issue? I typically don't see that in statutes and rules. I have on rare
Can we
occasions, but
say consistent with professional standard of care or consistent with standard of care?
Well, we can because standard of care is not defined.
So Kim, I apologize. I'm just trying to make sure I understand. What is new E actually saying are obtained from a source that in the professional judgment of the pharmacist is acceptable, reliable, and then I'm not sure where the active pharmaceutical ingredient piece reads in here.
And appropriate for intended compounding, including,
No, what does the sentence actually say? Where does this hyphen active pharmaceutical go? Is it just,
it goes in E, it replaces are obtained by,
so the hyphen active is the entire E?
yes,
Okay, so the other words that are up there will disappear.
yes.
All right, so can we scroll up a second? I just want to read the part where this is reading on to. All substances for compounding that receive, stored, or used by the pharmacy permittee shall, and then this is going to be E, active pharmacy. So I'm not sure how it reads here.
Well, that's the word shall, so we may have to do a new opening for not only A, C, maybe E also, just start off with a word that fixes, I guess, the sentence properly. And we can do that. That's just wordsmithing a little bit, but the intent won't change, just maybe some wording on how it flows will change.
Okay, so active pharmaceutical and other substances shall be obtained from a provider that in the professional judgment of the pharmacist is reputable, reliable, intended for compounding. Okay, but some of these substances, because now we're talking about and other substances, because we've got inert substances, binders, and others that I want to make sure we're not rolling into this with the other substances.
Well, that's what I'm trying to capture because we don't know all the practices out there that people are experimenting with or anything of that. But if it's actually identified by the FDA, it's got to be registered with the FDA before you can use it. Or
It doesn't if it's an inactive ingredient.
yeah,
So other substances is too broad.
so what's the proper term?
Active pharmaceutical ingredients.
Just
Almost
take out
none of the
other-
excipients are FDA approved. Because they're not drugs.
So other active pharmaceutical ingredients?
No, just active pharmaceutical ingredients should be sufficient. That's what the FDA requires.
I think on the first line of this, Cam, you
Yeah,
want to
first
delete
line.
and other substances.
I can go back up there.
So active pharmaceutical substances. Well, I think we already have it.
You already have it, Pam.
Oh, there we go.
And you need to delete the word and, yeah. Active pharmaceutical ingredients used for compounding should be obtained from a provider that in the professional judgment of the pharmacist is reputable and appropriate for the intended compounding use. Okay, so the obtained from the provider being the provider is reputable and reliable, but the appropriate for the intended compounding use relates to the active pharmaceutical ingredients.
What if we just ended it at intended compounding use? Is that acceptable?
I think that's right. That last sentence is just a for example. And I don't think you need that in a regulation.
Try to just get rid of this highlighted section.
The rest of it, I think.
And is that something that we could call out in the FAQ since we're already talking about putting together an FAQ document of kind of what that means?
Yeah, we could do that. I think this part right here kind of creates the parameters that substances that are identified by the FDA, those entities need to be registered with the FDA. And as well as if it's in the US, should be permitted by the Board of Pharmacy.
I think what I'm lost on is what do you mean by any substance identified by the FDA?
Well, that's what I'm picking your brain on. Any substance approved for compounding that's identified by the FDA.
But we're talking about the exception. What if you did this? If your goal is that the source has to be an FDA registered facility and licensed by the state, why don't we just say that?
Well, I think we're trying to capture the concerns you had brought, Mark, earlier about allergens are not on the FDA list or anything like that. How can they be registered with the FDA? So trying to leave it a little bit flexible so that if companies are trying to do products that are not on the approved compounding list, they're still able to do it based on professional judgment.
Isn't that defined in C up above? I don't know what that code, how that code reads, but I'm just curious, is it defined there? Are we
No,
just stating?
that's the so-called positive list for bulk drug substances.
Okay.
Yeah, to your point, nickel extract may not be sourceable from an FDA registered facility. And if they're not an FDA registered facility, then you have do we have to change the permitting requirements for Arizona to allow for non-registered FDA facilities? I get your desire to regulate those entities.
Well, but we use lots of other things, Mark. I mean, I get people doing allergens for shoe leather and detergent. You're not going to regulate everybody who makes all that stuff.
Right.
Yeah, and that's what I'm trying to capture here. I'm trying to keep the parameters, but also for those anomalies that you guys are identifying, have the pharmacists use their best professional judgment.
I'll be honest, I like the current language in the regulation because it hasn't caused a problem. I don't think the board has, at least in my history of observing the board, has ever had an issue with this part of the current regulation. Feels like we're trying to solve a problem that doesn't have, we're trying to solve something that isn't a problem.
Hey, Mark, let me throw out an example that I do think has happened. I think there are sources that have been used in compound that say they are not for human use, they're for experimental use or testing use only, that has come up.
Yeah.
But if they're labeled that way, then the board can say, hey, that wasn't reasonable professional judgment.
That's fair.
But it gets into the battle of the experts at that point.
It's a little, this is Jean Galvin, and I spoke to Cam a little bit about this, how professional judgment, and you use the term, acceptable, reliable, reputable, appropriate. I think that is, often very subjective. That could be a problem, just like the example you gave that, in the board's opinion, something could not be, reliable or reasonable, but yet a pharmacist would articulate that in his or her mind it was. And so I do think those vague terms could be problematic.
So guys, do you have actually, let me just circle back a little bit or move back a little bit. The intent, the intent is what I'm trying to capture, and it's just wordsmithing. I can continue to work with my rule writer, myself, to still capture the essence of what we're trying to do here. And just play around with the words and not have that open-endedness that we're looking for, but also some parameters that I'd be comfortable with. And if you guys are okay with that, we can kind of move on. It's just right now, I think it's just wordsmithing.
Okay.
Everybody aligned?
So number 2, I highlighted anticipatory compounding. And I know the FDA doesn't clearly have a definition. They have guidance on anticipatory compounding. Do we need to define what anticipatory compounding is? Up to 30 days and a history of 30 days or something of that nature?
Well, that's not exactly what the FDA says. I think federal law is pretty clear on it.
Is it the law or is it guidance? Is how
Well, the
they're
federal law allows for anticipatory guidance. That's where that term comes from. The guidance document says, hey, we don't know what that is. That's going to be a fact-dependent analysis. What we do know, though, is if there's no more than a 30-day supply, that's clearly a safe harbor. But there could be reasonable situations where you're going to have longer than a 30-day supply. And what's the quintessential example that all compounding pharmacies deal with? It is the capsule making machines. We have capsule making machines that are usually 100 count or 300 count. It's not reasonable to do less than a batch of 100 because of the way you measure and because of how you compound. So you make a batch of 100 capsules. They're going to have a BUD of 6 months. You dispense 30 of them on day 1 because that's the prescription you've got. You're not going to throw away the 70 because presumably that patient's either going to come back for refills. And if they come back for a refill, well, you dispense the next 30, but you still have 40 left. Why throw away the 40 because you're at 30 days? And so that's the challenge that every pharmacy compounding advisory council has dealt with for the last 30 years that I've been watching them is anticipatory compounding is, unfortunately, I know it when I see it in the eyes of a regulator. And there are clearly instances like that where you've got one patient on one dose and you make 100 at a time and they only take 1 capsule a day. It's reasonable to keep the remaining around until you need to make another batch. If you're in a high volume situation where you've got, particularly in sterile compounding now, and this should give you some comfort because the new USP guidelines reduce the batch sizes dramatically. Pharmacies can't make big batches anymore. They're all small batches. And same thing is, if they've got a few bottles left that are going to be consumed within 40 days or 50 days from a small batch run, that might be reasonable. But if you've got, tens of thousands that aren't going to be consumed in 30 days, then that would be different. And so at some point, I've got to rely on the professional judgment of the inspectors, and generally we have.
What do we have in the definition up above? Is it already covered there? Is that complete where this section may not be needed? There, you were there. At the top. I think the very top of this page. There. Compounding includes preparing drugs in anticipation of prescription orders, prepared on routine, regularly observed prescribing patterns, preparing drugs as an incident to research teaching. So is that enough information where we wouldn't need to duplicate it in another section?
I don't know. I mean, it's just a definition, so.
But it kind of spells out what can be done. It almost looks like we would just be duplicating it in another area.
This is Jean. I see where you draw that conclusion that the definition sort of sets parameters about, what can be done. But if you are going to direct what can or cannot be done in terms of, anticipatory compounding, I would prefer that it would be set out, separately from a definition. If someone's trying to determine whether their practice complies, it should be spelled out clearly versus in a group definition.
So Jean, you're saying we should have this definition in 2?
I think the definition is fine, but it also should be spelled out, in another place, what is anticipatory. And that's an often discussed topic. So we want to rely on just the definition.
So the highlighted area I just did for the compounding of human drug products. I think notation from last meeting looks like we may want to just get rid of that and end it at prescription orders. Would that make sense?
Yeah, I think that makes sense, Cam.
Yes.
I don't think we had any issues.
So
with
Cam,
the-
why would
Yeah.
go back to it a second? Why do we need to have in excess of the quantity dispensed? Why can't we just say a pharmacist may compound if the compounding is based on anticipatory compounding of the pharmacist receiving valid patient prescription? Do we need, why in excess of the quantity dispensed? A pharmacist may compound if the compound is based on anticipatory compounding of the pharmacist receiving valid patient-specific prescription orders. I just don't think you need the words in excess of the quantity dispensed. I mean, others can disagree, but
No, I like fewer words. I like it.
Okay. We'll take a look. Anything else on number 2? All right, I don't think we had any issues with B, C, and D from last time.
On 3, you're up a little bit. I just want to be sure that we don't make it seem as if a 503B can't compound for a 503A. It talks about veterinary compounding. But as I was reading it, I just want to make sure that that's clear to everyone.
Cam, remind me how we permit 503Bs.
As a manufacturer.
They're as a manufacturer. So this language that restricts a pharmacy permittee or a pharmacist would not restrict a manufacturer.
Are there concerns with it, or do we need to wordsmith?
Does
As
it,
long- Go
is
ahead.
it clear what I was saying? Is it clear to you all that that's the case?
My plain read of this regulation only restricts pharmacy permittees or pharmacists acting solo from engaging in the rest of the activity, with the exception of veterinary drugs. A 503B is a manufacturer, so it would be able to sell product for office use and to pharmacy permittees.
Okay,
That's my plain read, unless someone disagrees with me. So you're right, it should be clear.
Any other thoughts?
I have a question of why we specifically call out different roles in 4A. Or 4, sorry, not 4A, just 4. Because I don't know who is doing the advertising or promoting. I don't know if that would be necessarily be a, I guess it says pharmacy. Is that going to be any employee by the pharmacy? I was thinking permittee.
What's the purpose of the word only?
I don't know. It must have come up in a conversation. I can't pinpoint it. So,
I mean, I know this isn't what it's saying, but are we only allowed to advertise compounding services? We can't advertise that we'll counsel you, we'll fill prescriptions accurately. I know that's not the intent, but when you use the word
Yeah.
only,
Yeah, I think the word, I get what 4 is doing. It's trying to conform with the 2002 Supreme Court decision on free speech related to pharmacy advertising. Do we even need 4? Because it's a federal rule of what the guardrails are for advertising compounding services, and it's a landmark Supreme Court decision.
Yeah, the only challenge with some of those federal rules are if we also, and I'm not necessarily into having duplicate laws, but if it's in federal section and we don't identify it in our own, it seems like the federal jurisdiction would have to find them guilty before we can find them guilty. Unless we do it by reference or something of that nature, or list it ourselves, because then we
Well-
can take action also based on our statutes and rules.
Well, the federal law is silent now because of the 2002 Supreme Court decision, when the feds tried to limit the advertising capabilities of a compounding pharmacy. And Justice O'Connor said, no, that's an improper restriction of commercial speech. And she gave, in her majority opinion, the guardrails. I think this could be challenged based upon that Supreme Court statute, or the Supreme Court holding from 2002. What you can't do is provide false or misleading advertising, and there's tons of Arizona law on that. And so other agencies have a hook there, even if you don't think you do in the Pharmacy Practice Act. You could always refer it to one of the other agencies.
Mark, what's your concern though? 4 just says you're allowed to do something.
The only part.
Well, I think he's taken out only already.
Oh, then I'm okay with it.
My question is, what does pharmacy mean? Is that the permit holder? Or anyone who works in the pharmacy or is employed by the pharmacy?
My thought that is that it would probably just be like whoever works there, or like a contractor or something. It is the word only supposed to go at the front of the sentence? Only a pharmacy or pharmacist should advertise compounds? Is that the intent of this?
Well, a physician could.
Yeah. Could promote.
I don't think they're supposed to be targeting specific drugs like my pharmacy, compound semaglutide for weight loss, right? So I don't think you can get specific in that sense.
You can if you drop the for weight loss. You're absolutely allowed to describe
Yeah.
the
You can't-
products that you compound. You just can't make a claim. And that's clear.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep. Any more thoughts, discussions on this one? So the word only is being stricken. It was never there, so we're just now removing it again.
Makes sense to me.
I think 5 should read
Can we, before, I'm
commercially.
sorry, before we go on, could we go back up to the label for veterinary medicine? Do we want to add that the label should also include something that says for veterinary use only?
I suppose you could. I get the intention, but I worry that if a drug isn't for veterinary use only, it might be construed as misbranding. I don't know.
But this relates to when a medicine is compounded for a veterinarian.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I suppose you could add it.
Which line you looking at, Gene?
Under 3, A, B, C, D talks about the label that includes those a lot control, the product's name, beyond use date. And then just add something that says for veterinary use only, just so it's clear when that, product is made, where it's going and for what purpose. Sorry to interrupt, Kristen.
Oh, you're fine.
I just know that for some like labeling type rules, you might expect to get some pushback from the veterinary compounder saying they might not have room on the label to write that.
You could do it with an auxiliary sticker.
Yeah. So should I make a G saying for veterinary use only?
I was thinking something like that, but
Number 5. We had discussed this. I had just recently added this, so I kind of wanted to get your thoughts on C.
Before that, can I would suggest 5 being commercially available drug products shall not be compounded unless, and just taking off a pharmacist, like, does that mean an intern can do it? Or, you know what I mean? Like, I don't understand why that would even be there. Just commercially available drug products shall not be compounded unless.
This is something you're just replicating federal law.
Yeah.
So do you need to is the question.
Yeah, that's the other thing. I feel like a lot of this, we're kind of working backwards from when we intended to not be so wordy. I feel like in this section, we're pretty wordy and duplicative, but
Is commercially available drug product defined anywhere?
Nope. That's what the whole court case in Texas is about. We could define it. I've got an idea.
Go ahead, Mark, throw it out
My
there.
definition would be drug that the pharmacy can purchase from a commercial source on the day it's compounded. Or pharmacy can or cannot, the pharmacy cannot purchase from a commercial source on the day that it's compounded. Now, I'll be candid, for full disclosure, that would be different than how the feds enforce it. The feds say, gosh, if it's not on the shortage list, it's commercially available, regardless of your ability to buy it from a commercial source. And I think that's ridiculous. Commercially available, if you look it up in Webster's dictionary, it says it's available for purchase from a commercial source. And it would be nice if Arizona said that. And that was the enforcement position back in the day when I started compounding, which was, hey, if you can show me that you couldn't get this on the day you compounded it from any reliable source, show me the screenshots of your wholesaler that says 0 are on hand. Show me your diligence to try to acquire this. And if you've shown a reasonably sufficient amount of evidence that you couldn't acquire it from a commercial source, then we can understand the reason for compounding it. We've strayed from that enforcement position over the years. It would be nice to go back to that enforcement position, particularly in light of what's going on right now. A pharmacy that has 200 prescriptions to fill can only buy 1 box that day. They buy the 1 box. What do you do with the other 199 patients?
Implicit in the drug product is the strength and dosage form also?
I think so, yeah. So to your point, a particular commercially manufactured product sometimes can be found in the less used doses, but the 7.5 milligram dose is hardly ever available.
Thoughts
can
on
we
this,
stay
guys?
silent on this? Because it's going on in all these other realms being discussed.
Sorry, Kirsten, I didn't hear the first part of what you said.
Can we just stay silent on this? Just because it's being discussed in all these other places it's fluid right now, potentially.
I think the FDA kind of has its position about commercially available products and compounding.
They do, it's in their guidance document.
Yeah. So being silent on it, I don't know if that's an option. Maybe just simply say compounding any commercially available product in compliance with the FDA.
Would it
Well,
be
if you
FDCA?
if you reference the guidance document, what happens if the guidance document changes?
Yeah, that's that's always the burn.
I think this is pretty similar to the API discussion in that there's like an FDA component that is like kind of confusing if this is in conflict with it, but also it's also kind of hard to enforce from Cam's team, right? Because if we're like talking about wholesaler screenshots or whatnot, like what if you are just producing wholesaler screenshots from a wholesaler that doesn't even carry that kind of drug? Like, that seems to be a little bit hard to document. Like a generic manufacturer as opposed like looking for a branded drug.
I don't know. I think that's pretty skeptical. It's pretty easy. It wasn't difficult in the past. Most of the pharmacies that compound have a McKesson, Cardinal, or Bergen account. And if those three big wholesalers can't supply it to you, then that's a pretty accurate proxy for what's happening in the marketplace. If you're showing them a screenshot from Mark Bosen's boutique wholesaler in Gilbert, Arizona, well, you know, I don't want to give the inspectors extra work, but they can call Mark Bosen's boutique wholesaler in Arizona because it has a permit and say, hey, have you ever carried this drug? Would you ever carry this drug? It looks like you only do veterinary stuff, or it looks like you only do 5 or 6 things. And that wouldn't be a credible piece of evidence.
Isn't this number 5 kind of giving you, Mark, what you're asking for in general? Allowing you to check your channels, see if it's available. If not, keep the evidentiary information and supply when asked by the board.
I like it. If that's what you meant by B, then yes, that would work.
Well, B and C, right? C is kind of asking you to maintain the documentation.
Sure. Yeah, of course. Yeah. Okay. I'm in.
So Cam, just I have a question. So maybe you already spoke about it previously about compounding drugs when the drug is on shortage or is on the shortage list with FDA. Just to be clear for pharmacists when they can do it.
I think if it's on the shortage list, I don't think 5 really applies because the FDA has identified it to be on a shortage list.
Correct.
And you're
Yeah, but
allowed to compound and bypass number 5. You don't have to show evidence.
But do we need to mention it in this rules?
Doesn't 5B do that? It's not available,
Yeah,
shortage.
I think it does.
It implies it, yeah, that it's on a shortage list because it's not available.
Okay, so that will cover it.
I just want to let this group know, unfortunately, I have to drop in like 5 minutes. Will we still have quorum?
Yes.
Okay.
I think the rest of this stuff, I didn't modify from our discussion. It seems to all be the same language that we had at the last meeting. I think, Mark, I think you were going to give me some language on the container closure.
Oh man. All right. Yep. I'm
Provided
on it. I'm
chapters.
sorry.
All right, but other than that, other than the reference, I don't think anything else is really different than what we discussed.
So are we at the point where we're ready to send it to the board?
Yes and no. We still have like, I think, I don't know if it was Bina that identified that we still have to address sterile pharmaceutical products.
Okay, I think that's
Report
next on the
23.
agenda, right?
Yeah, that is.
Okay,
That
all right.
is.
Any concerns with the last portion? Or are we all aligned that that piece is at least done with the exception of the container closures that Mark needs to provide to Cam? Any concerns? Going once.
I have one question in J. The NIOSH, I don't believe has been referenced before. So I think that needs to be more clearly identified before we use the acronym.
We can do that.
Under H, and I'm working backwards, sorry. H, to protect the pharmaceutical product safety, identify identity, strength, quantity, and purity. A pharmacy permittee shall ensure that the equipment and utensils. Should that also be a responsibility of the PIC instead of the permittee?
Yeah, I think that is reasonable. We do that in lots of other sections of the code.
I don't know if they can ensure the design of the pharmacy.
Yeah, maybe that's why it's not there.
I mean, maintenance and cleaning, sure, that makes sense.
Could it be an or? That somebody has to do it, whether it's the permittee or the pharmacist, because I think some parts are the PIC and some parts of the permittee.
Yes.
I had one small thing too, if we're done with this section. In C, it uses the term secretary. I think it's secretary of HHS. I'm not sure. I think above it. Or maybe what used to be.
And C.
Under 410, 23, 410. Maybe just search secretary. Capitalize secretary. So there under, sorry, yeah, 1C. Up above it does say United States Secretary of Health and Human Services. Here it says secretary. I'm assuming it's the same thing.
We can look for that.
Let me highlight it real quick.
In some things, I mean, I think it's a little more obvious, but in some things I read, that means the Department of Insurance Secretary, just for clarity's sake.
All right, we'll take a look at that part. You wanted NIOSH to be spelled out here, Gene and J, right?
Yeah, because it was spelled out before, but then it was deleted. And then Jay, I think we also in the beginning, the second sentence says copies of the incorporated materials may be obtained here. And then you go right into shall develop a facility specific list. So I think there's just a disconnect between those sentences that we can wordsmith without changing the intent.
Is that in J also?
Correct.
All right, I'll just highlight it in blue here to take a look at it.
And then highlight, please, the word shall, when you said the pharmacy permittee or pharmacist in charge should establish their own procedures.
Where are you reading that?
It's about a third of the way down. Right there, should establish. Okay, I think that's all I have on that one.
Thank you. All right, so moving on to R 423-670, sterile pharmaceutical products. I kind of just redlined the entire section and rebuilt it. And would like your thoughts on it. And I think Bina had identified that E needs to be also gone, which I did initially, but when I saved it, it didn't stick, so so E is now stricken, but I'd like your thoughts on the rest of it, to rewrite. I think Jean, you had a suggestion on something as well, which is C, policy procedures, and D.
I just wasn't sure about the difference between C and D.
Where'd these come from?
I just put it together.
I can see where we can remove the required policy and procedures because it covers, I mean, it's just the same section, right? I didn't catch that before. To Jean's point.
Well, even more simply, before we get into the lettered sections, the preamble says, in addition to being in compliance with the USP chapters, the following requirements apply to compounding. But sterile compounding area requirements, policies, and procedures are components that are required in those guidelines. So is it necessary to repeat them?
And I mean, I'm fine. I mean, as long as we just keep, I think everything that we need to do in this section is clearly outlined in the USP chapters, and we just follow that, right? And then that first statement should be okay. I don't know, Kim, how you feel about that? Except for the minimum requirements, I guess, the square footage.
Well, if we do it by reference, yeah, I'd like to eliminate redundancy. And if we can capture all of it just by referencing it, I'm fine with that.
So A would go away, it would just be in reference. Is that right? Because I was gonna say, it seems like not in line what we were doing previously with square footage.
Exactly. And so USP 797 would define, it actually does a really good job defining the requirements of the sterile compounding area, including whether or not you're using, a barrier isolator. And a barrier isolator wouldn't need to be in 100 square feet, but would be compliant with USP 797. And also the other advantage to referencing 797 is that sterile compounding area requirement says 100 square feet, but it doesn't talk about the ISO requirements of the 100 square feet. But it is absolutely clear in 797. And what do I mean by that? The PEC has to be ISO 5 inside at least an ISO 7 room. And if you're using a barrier isolator that has an internal component of ISO 5 or better, it has to be in an ISO 7 environment. And so you get much more detail and granularity in 797. And it also, I think from a practical standpoint, leaving it there would force the new compounder to just go to those chapters rather than try to read through and go, oh, I'm compliant with A. Well, you might not be compliant with A if you're not carefully reading USP 797.
Yeah, I agree. I think I mean, this section will get more confusing to both the permittees, the pharmacists in charge, and also the compliance officers, right? But if we just leave that one general statement on the top, I think that would be helpful. These are clearly defined, all of these sections, policies, equipment, the compounding areas, and USP, the chapters, so. We're okay. And if you're okay with moving the rest of the sections.
If the wish is to get rid of 670, majority of it, why don't we just move it to 410? Because that's compounding practice standards anyways, and just create another tab, what G or whatever letter we're on in 410, and just say sterile pharmaceutical products shall comply with, and then just give the reference of USB. And just repeal 670 altogether.
I think that makes sense, Cam, because once you get to R420, once you get to R423, 410, you feel like you're there. You feel like that's all the compounding rules, and you might stop reading. So putting it back in that section might also help.
Hey, quick question. With Emily and Lori out, do we still have quorum?
Let me take a quick roll call. Okay, so Lori's gone.
It just said she'd be right back on the chat.
Oh, is that what that means?
Isn't that what BRB means?
I don't know.
We got
Now I know.
We got Kevin Borg still on, right?
For teenagers.
Kevin, you're still
Yeah,
there?
I'm here.
All right, Kristen's still there. Kevin Dang is not there. Matt Pond, you still there?
I am.
All right, Emily's gone. Jamie's still there.
Yes.
Mr. Bozen's still there. Roger's still there. Michelle, are you in?
I'm here.
All right, so Michelle's there. Bina's there.
Sounds like we're good. Okay.
And Tariq is there. Garrett's not there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, we still have quorum, Roger.
Good deal.
Thank you for checking. So to capture R423 670, repeal that section and just move sterile pharmaceutical products and referencing USP into 410. And just that one, yeah, just referencing USP and get rid of everything else because it's already identified in USP. It's a fair statement.
No
That makes
objections.
sense.
Okay, so we will work on that. That was easy peasy. We're an hour into the meeting. Anybody need a little?
I could
Little
take a
break?
5-minute bio break.
Yeah, let's go ahead and do that.
All right, let's do that.
5-minute good with
minutes.
everybody. Come back
5
at
minutes
10
good.
after.
Yeah, 5 minutes good.
Okay, thanks, guys.
officers. Yeah.
Cam, you're not on mute.
Yep.
Hey, is everybody back?
I'm
Yes.
here.
Looks like everybody is present, Madam Chair.
All right.
All right, I just want to circle in my compliance team to see if they had any thoughts on
Okay.
what we all discussed earlier. So Truman, Ben, Max, are you guys present? Any thoughts, concerns?
Yes, we are here. Thank you, Cam. Just a quick point of clarification. In the newest USP 797, we don't see any requirements for square footage or size for any of the clean suites. So if it's still the intent of the TF, just wanted to highlight the fact that there's a lot of description about placement of PECs, but nothing in there for minimum size or operating space. And one thing that I'm probably just the only one in the room that doesn't completely understand, but just wanted to clarify and make sure that compounders were still allowed to compound for MD's office's use. The addition of the veterinarian section was just kind of throwing us off in terms of the addition to compounders still being able to provide for MD office use only. Those are only two things we had.
I would say in the square footage, if it's not spelled out in USP, then we should keep it consistent with what we've done in the other sections, which was appropriate to the need, essentially.
Yeah, I agree with Kristen. My point was, you know, a glove box wouldn't need 100 square feet if that was a sufficient tool for that particular pharmacy. And so for a long time, we've been talking about minimum square footage, and the board, I think, is weary of granting variances for modern pharmacy that may not need our historic definitions of minimum square footage. And then with regard to the MD office use, I think the intent there was to harmonize our regulation with federal rules that are in DQSA, which prohibits a 503A from compounding for human office use, because the DQSA excludes veterinary products. We wanted to make sure it was clear that office use is permitted for pharmacies that compound for veterinarians. And so that was just trying to clean up that section of law that candidly is contradictory to federal law and has been since 2013.
I see. Yeah, I wasn't sure if that would impact some of the current compounders that do compound for office use currently, and if that was going to roll reverse. So thank you for clarifying.
I'm a big fan of Arizona saying to the feds, we want to compound for human office use.
So if we stay silent on the square footage, Kristen, Mark, I mean, I'd leave it up to the business. Or do we want to
Well, that's
identify?
what we were doing in the other sections.
Yeah, yeah. I think our
I'm supportive of that.
just staying silent on it.
Yes.
I would emphasize, we probably want to have an FAQ when you're done with this. We took out a lot of things to assume that they're appropriate for business and practices, because there's still people are going to want some guidelines, because I hope we're not going to have someone walk in with a 20 square foot pharmacy, you know, that kind of stuff. But we probably, when these all come out, need to explain all of that.
They would need to explain to us why that made sense and how it's safe.
Okay. Any other thoughts, questions? I think I unshared my screen, but I'll bring it back up here. All right. I think the next thing, so we're moving away from USP right now. I think the task force committee is, I'll make the adjustments that we talked about, and we'll present it to the board at the April meeting to get the ball rolling on that, so we can kind of put it to rest once and for all. It's been worked on for a long time, so it'd be nice to have it behind us. Next thing I think is really Tarek's question at the last board meeting, and chair and vice chair and I spoke about this, and maybe a good opportunity for us to talk about the consultation component. So it'd be R423-402, which talks about consultation and what it requires. That's been a talking point for some time now, but I think it's about time we address it. So
I
Tarek,
would like to see it with a different title. Maybe something about consultation instead of putting who can do what, because we're going to spell it out below.
right.
It'll be easier to find if it's under consultation or something.
And also I was looking at section F. If you go to FC, if we can add any verbiage there.
Under what section, Tarek?
F, I believe so, as I remember. I was just yep, here. So I wonder if we can do like add verbiage there, because here nothing in the requires a pharmacy kind of intern, pharmacy intern to provide order, so nothing require them if patients refuses. So maybe we can add something under this line.
Can we back up a second before we get into specifics? I thought we had a discussion, and maybe I'm just making this up in my head, that we were talking about, can we mandate counseling, but it can be oral or written, and the option to do counseling, the counseling would be the pharmacist or the patient's request. But I think we would change sort of the focus here that counseling is required, but it can be written or oral.
Right.
That would solve it all.
I know Lori, I just listened to the other meeting. I know Lori was saying she was gonna look at language. I looked up too, in Kansas, it says provide counseling to the patient or ensure that a process is in place for the patient to receive counseling. So, I mean, I think we could keep it simple like that, or provide written documentation for counseling.
But if we
Yeah.
provide a written, how we can document this? I mean, just technician will document that a written consultation was provided, or still the pharmacist?
Do we need to document, I guess, is the other question, right? There's most states don't require documentation.
So we can use the same verbiage for mail, or like if, I don't know if, which one, Cam, the one talking about mail or home delivery, there's specific one says like written consultation can be provided. Let me see which number.
Because I don't think you need to go through all the oral counseling requirements. It would just be, this is what counseling requires, whether it's in writing or oral.
Okay.
Or, I don't know, there may be a third form at some point in the future, some holographic communication or.
Or just like you add to, shall provide oral or written consultation. That's it, right? That's in the first line. Up, yep, here to the B. Is that right, Roger?
Well, do we need to say oral? Can we just say counseling, and maybe we put in a definition, counseling is either oral, written, or some other method, whatever, but.
So back to that language, do you like this? Provide counseling to the patient or ensure that a process is in place for the patient to receive counseling.
That works.
Do you want to put that in the chat real quick,
Sure.
Kristen? So maybe
Yeah.
I can just capture it and.
I mean, there's another. So like looking at a couple of other states, so there's a requirement, like minimum requirements for filling prescriptions and patient counseling being part of that, right? And prospective drug review, accuracy of verifying the accuracy of a prescription. You could add it to even the definition of unprofessional conduct for not offering counseling, something like that versus all the specificity here. Your suggestion is good too. Kristen. Do we need all the definitions of what oral consultation should
No,
require?
No,
I don't
that,
think so.
no, that should be removed since we're not using oral.
Do we want to get rid of that whole section or just have consultation? Because I mean, there's going to be times that some of that stuff isn't required, and there's other things that the pharmacist should counsel on too. So I don't like lists of things typically.
Yeah, I agree.
But we can add a verbiage like if pharmacist deems oral consultation necessary, so staff should not accept or not provide written consultation. Like if
I
the
mean,
pharmacist deems it-
two addresses that, right? So if you have here, like the current proposal here is that you have to provide counseling if it's not new to, if it's new to therapy, or not with the same dosage form or directions, but it doesn't say that it has to be done orally, or if the pharmacist determines oral consultation is warranted. So for example, if there was-
that's what we, yeah.
if there was a concern that you needed to clarify with the patient, obviously you should do that instead of giving them written materials right before you give it to them.
So you're talking about number 2, right, Lori?
I
Pharmacist.
think oral should be remain there, Cam, and 2.
Yeah, and number 2, we keep it there.
But to your point, Lori, this is Jamie. I think that C can be removed, right?
Yeah,
Because
Yeah.
we can give them different communication to suffice for any of these. Not to mention it's probably easily retained or retrievable on the internet or any other source.
The only question I have on C is, do we want to say something like consultation shall include at a minimum, not oral, but just consultation shall include at a minimum certain things?
So kind of defining what consultation means, basically.
Like make sure, I mean, the written materials have to say the name of the drug, how to take the drug, you know,
Yeah.
common side effects, that kind of stuff.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
I agree with that, Roger.
So I'm sorry, guys, there's multiple ideas being shared. So it's 3,
So leave 3 like you've got it.
all right.
Big C, strike oral.
I think C, I'm sorry, 3, the oral should stay in. The patient wants an oral, they should be allowed.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's true. If they have questions and want to talk to somebody.
Right.
Okay.
So you have to basically what we're saying is you have to provide them at a minimum written materials. But if the pharmacist wants to talk to them or if the patient wants to talk to them, then you shall do oral consultation.
just like, okay, that's good, number C, so you kept oral, okay.
So
Sounds
no,
good.
kill C in C, kill the word oral. I think is what Roger was suggesting. Consultation shall at a minimum include.
And I don't know if the words reviewing needs to be in 1, 2, and 3. It's just the item itself.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I know like big chain or big pharmacies will be able to provide this, but those small independent pharmacy, you think that's doable for them?
Well,
To
they're
provide-
allowed to do oral.
Okay, so that's want to make sure, okay. If they do oral, that's will satisfy, okay,
Well, all this information is included in a normal drug leaflet anyway.
okay, yeah.
This should all be included in the written materials given in a prescription anyway.
Yep.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Number 4,
I guess 4 strike providing oral information. I think just get rid of
Should be
providing oral.
And I think you take out the word written there, special instructions and information. If it's in writing, great. If it's oral, it's great. Just take out the word written.
Yeah, I like that, Roger.
I don't think you need D at all.
We don't need to know, but this is not.
I agree. I don't think you need E either, really, do you?
Agreed. That was all optional anyway.
I don't think we need F either now because the oral consultation would be
Requested.
requested or dictated by the pharmacist. Like if you have a concern about patient safety and you don't want to dispense the prescription until you talk to the patient, you shouldn't do that anyway. So I don't think it's necessary.
So the question about documentation now.
There's only a couple states that require documentation. I understand. I mean, I see both sides of it, right? If you didn't document, did you do it?
Mhm.
And it's a he said, she said if it's not documented. But what pharmacy doesn't provide written materials
Written
at a minimum?
Yeah, exactly. If that's considered consultation, then everybody's doing it.
I think you can get rid of G and H too.
Yeah,
I do too.
we're definitely gonna have to explain this in an FAQ or something, because it's gonna be so new.
So if a
Different.
pharmacist under professional judgment states that, yeah, oral consultation is required, or the patient requests oral consultation, should that be documented? Because the patient can say, I requested, but the pharmacist refused to give me oral consultation. But if they document it, then that may be needed. If requested, documentation
I
should
mean,
be.
if requested, it should be documented.
So could we wordsmith it to say if oral consultation is provided? I'm just spitballing here. If oral consultation is provided, the documentation of the pharmacist or intern performing the consultation, something to that effect, like who provided it, or if it was declined upon request of the patient, why the reason for declination or something like that. This is
I
only
mean, I
going
hate to say the reason, because I mean, so many times you don't know why. They don't feel like waiting. They don't tell you. They just don't want to.
Why are we
But-
requiring documentation?
Yeah.
If a patient
I
comes
don't
back
think we
to
need
the
it.
pharmacy a week after they get their prescription and they talk to the pharmacist, we don't document that. I mean, you should, but we don't mandate it.
Yeah, because you're gonna have encounter for that.
And I think probably when it came before the board, it's because it was a requirement for the oral consultation. So we're thinking of it in that way. If we're doing away with that portion, then why would we need to document whether or not?
It becomes a he said, she said argument. Patient can request counseling and a pharmacist, and the patient will complain saying, hey, I asked for counseling and the pharmacist refused to give it to me. And the pharmacist can say, well, here's my documentation. I did counsel, and that becomes a dismissed case for us, right? Otherwise, it becomes
Is that a good business practice or something we should mandate?
well, business practice is something we can't hold people accountable to.
That's what I'm saying is,
Cam,
Well-
how often does that occur?
It moves into our dismissal category when we go in and we see that documentation was either refused. So we would look at that. We would look at video if that's available. But we do get quite a bit of complaints on counseling as well.
Mhm.
But it's not
But
we've
Cam,
heard
is,
the
To the
yeah,
board too, sometimes.
But
but
we do have it, yeah.
But Cam,
But to
isn't
the
that
point-
really an issue because we require oral counseling? If pharmacies are providing written counseling materials with every prescription anyway, and offering oral consultation when the patient requests it or when the pharmacist deems that it's necessary based on whatever reason, like,
We are requiring it though now because the patient is requesting it. So if the patient requests it, for our rules, we're requiring the pharmacist to counsel.
so to the point of like document, I believe should be mandated. Like any interaction for prescription, not for OTC, because you don't have a file for random patients asking for OTC. But if somebody call pharmacy, not upon picking up, I believe that's a good practice for pharmacists to document this interaction. We don't need
I-
details, but say,
I
you know,
think that would be hard with some pharmacy systems though, Tariq, after the fact.
Yeah,
After
I
it's
would
sold.
agree.
okay.
I don't know. I get what you're saying, Kim. I just practically, I don't, what does this look like in operations?
I mean, aren't the complaints going to be if you have them? I wanted to talk to the pharmacist, and I don't know that any pharmacist could say, no, I won't talk to you. They didn't come to me, it took too long, or that process. I mean, do we really have pharmacists who are refusing to talk to patients?
There are a few, I would say.
Also, we have like trainees that don't tell the pharmacist that someone
But-
wanted to talk to them or something, I guess.
I don't know. I really see that this comes up when we investigate a complaint, right? So somebody writes in a complaint that prescription X was filled incorrectly. And in the narrative that the patient submits, they say the pharmacist didn't speak to me or the pharmacist didn't counsel me. So then that becomes, we look at the documentation isn't there. It's not usually that's usually not the genesis of the complaint is the pharmacist didn't want to speak to me. I
So
don't
let's
know.
in this scenario, the patient said the pharmacist did not talk to me. So what is the proof that the written documentation given to the patient?
What if we did like if oral consultation is requested by the patient and is refused by the pharmacist or intern, it must be documented. So that the assumption would be that it was provided if it was asked for, unless the exception was documented.
It's not documented, it didn't happen.
We're trying to avoid that he said, she said argument. The patient will be like, I asked for it, they didn't get it. I don't know. I mean, we do get customer service, well, we kind of deem it as customer service today, a lot of them. Because there is some form of documentation today is required, but now we're taking a lot of that out, but we're still leaving that component in where the patient could ask for consultation, and it would be a requirement for that pharmacist to speak to them. How do we show that they did?
So Cam, wouldn't that still be a he said, she said type of situation? Like, well, the patient says, I asked for it, but the pharmacist said, I don't have any record, I don't remember the patient ever saying that. It still can be a he said, she said situation.
I also think you're going to free up a lot more pharmacists' time to actually have the counseling here. And I hate to
Right.
require a system to track all this for thousands and thousands of conversations where there's going to be 3 or 4 that someone complains about that he refused.
agree.
Refused.
I agree. I think we're looking at reducing the workload of pharmacists, and I think the interaction where the pharmacist walks over and the patient says, I don't have any questions, I don't want to talk to you, versus the patient has questions for the pharmacist and they want to get the consultation, I think is it changes a lot with the daily interactions that the pharmacist has with the patient.
Mhm.
I don't know. I personally don't think documentation is necessary, but
I agree. I don't think documentation is necessary. And I think that most pharmacists in general are gonna talk to a patient if they ask to be spoken to.
And most of the pharmacists document if it's something very important, right? And they think like they need to follow up or they need to document. I mean, I believe most of the pharmacists, they do documentation themselves.
I mean, I think if a pharmacist has a significant concern and would require counseling based on whatever patient safety concern or whatever, I think that that's going to get documented, right?
Correct.
If you've got if you've got a block on a prescription because you're worried and want to talk to the patient before you dispense that,
Correct.
I personally would document that because that's going to be something where there's a safety concern. To me, that goes back to, a standard of care. I know we don't define that in Arizona, but that to me would be what I would expect to see. If somebody said, I have a question about whether this person, what their allergic reaction to sulfa is, because they have a sulfa allergy. And then I dispensed a sulfa prescription, the prescription with sulfa in it, I would expect that I, had a conversation with the patient, not a true allergy, something like that would be in the profile or
Okay.
on the prescription.
I agree.
I think you're right, Roger. I think we're looking for the needle in the haystack that we want to hold somebody accountable for, which is really not going to be the thing.
Now, these items here in LCAM, I don't know if that fits within the minimum things that should be in counseling. Most of these seem like they're appropriate, but
Yeah, I believe I mean, at this point, we don't need this at all because that above will cover this, right?
I mean, I don't remember what we had in that list with the minimum before, because these all seem appropriate.
I mean, kind of the same, kind of like,
Is it the same as C 1, 2, 3, 4?
Yeah.
different
Yeah.
verb.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and this is specifically to delivered medication, and I'm not sure why we have the two carved out. It should be one and the same. Consultation is consultation, rather.
But yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, any of these that aren't in C 1, 2, 3, and 4, I'm fine with. I mean, getting the information.
Yeah,
Should we add maybe an opposite here? Maybe should we add some of these other things to
yeah,
the
number
other,
4.
to
Yeah,
the
just
other,
move them up.
move them up, like a phone number for questions? I think that if you're going to provide only written counseling materials, there should be a way for somebody to get a hold of a pharmacist.
Correct. And number
Now, to be
4,
fair, there's a phone number on every label, but
Right. So maybe we don't need that part of it.
yeah, so we don't need the mail one, specific to mail.
We don't need a phone number, or should we just leave it there?
you can leave it.
It-
I mean,
I don't have a problem with leaving it. I mean, technically it's going to be on a label anyway.
And I think special instructions and information kind of covers like missed doses and stuff like that. So not,
I agree. And we already require the intern and the pharmacist to wear a name badge earlier and like someplace else in our rules. So I don't think that that's necessary.
we're getting back to our roots, getting rid of some excess language.
Team fewer words over here.
Oh, yeah,
Do we
number
need
2,
J and L?
right, somewhere? Is that right, Cam? Like for number K, we already have this rule somewhere else, correct?
Actually, Jay used to exempt you from oral consultation. We changed it to consultation. I think prescription meds, delivered to these other locations, still should have the written information.
Yeah, if it's a take-home med, really.
Yeah.
Do we have to specifically say to a licensed healthcare firm, or we just, does
I
the
think we
beginning?
Should we
cover
just
it
get
all?
rid of, should we get rid of
Get
all
rid
of
of
it?
J. Yeah, because then C still just applies to everything.
Yeah,
I think so. If it's a prescription that's dispensed to a patient, that's new, they shall get counseling, which means written or oral, period, regardless of the setting.
And didn't we say K is elsewhere?
yeah, we see it elsewhere. We don't need it here.
Look how many words we got rid of.
Is
Not that
L
that's
relevant?
typical.
Is L relevant here at all?
No.
Inpatient pharmacists, they talk to patients all the time, which so this is part of their workflow. So I don't think is needed there.
I agree.
Agreed.
Herman, Ben, Max, any thoughts?
Can we double check on the drug to drug interactions? That was an additional piece on the delivery written counsel sheets versus the 1, 2, 3, and 4 here. So,
You can add that back in if that's specific, if we think that's beneficial.
okay.
Yeah, I don't
I'm
have any-
looking to see where else.
About
data
drug
is
interaction,
required.
general drug interaction, or to a patient specific. Did you? That's the question. I don't know if you're talking about drug interaction for patient specific or just general drug interaction, like NSAIDs and warfarin, for example.
I think the intent was for drug specific, but
Yeah, because sometimes I don't know, like, if you're gonna show the patients everything, and I mean, we discuss it with the patient, but also some drug interaction is within
I don't
acceptable.
know. Sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off. I'm so sorry.
No, go ahead.
I don't know if you're providing like a monograph, that's not necessarily going to be drug to drug specific of what that
Correct.
patient's taking.
Correct. It's not drug to drug specific. Well, with monograph, it is just like general major drug interaction. But what I'm saying, this is like part of when the pharmacist deems consultation, when they have major drug interaction.
Mm-hmm.
Why, if it's acceptable for a pharmacist, I mean,
that would be relayed in
sometimes you
when
don't
the
want
pharmacist wants to pull it. Yeah.
sometimes you don't want to pull this drug interaction if it's very minimal. You don't want to scare patients from taking their medications, right? So it is always clinical judgment,
Right.
what to discuss about.
Well, and I think that's the situation where you provide the oral counseling.
Correct. And that's what I believe drug interaction, I believe having it there, it will be very strict.
Yeah, I don't think we can have that there.
We already had it for written counseling before. I mean, it already exists. We were doing it.
Oh, okay.
It's
when
not new.
delivering, when delivering.
For delivery, right? But
Yeah.
I mean, it's on the written materials then.
So
Yeah,
it's provided like in a monograph, because I don't know that could be happening.
Theoretically, every mailed prescription had this already.
And I don't
Okay.
think that there's been an issue there. So I would be fine with keeping it consistent.
So adding it to number 4, special instructions or information regarding side effects, procedure for missed doses, drug, food drug would be appropriate.
You mean in that section? I think it's fine. I'm still kind of concerned about it being
What do you
specific
think?
to the patient. Well, if you, I mean, I've said it 3 times, but but I'm going to repeat myself. I just don't know that it would be specific to that patient's drugs that they're taking. If you're giving them a monograph, I know you're saying it was required before, but I don't understand how it was.
Yeah, according to
different.
this is where it was for any mail delivered prescription.
Yeah, I mean, and I mean, I believe the way I understand it is a general drug interaction or drug disease interaction. Because
Okay.
if it's
Okay.
specific to a patient, pharmacists should talk to patient because we don't want
Yeah.
patients to misunderstand the drug interaction and they stop taking their medication. It could be
Right. Okay. So if it's a specific drug to drug interaction, it's
that
going to
would be
require
yeah,
the
specific
pharmacist to
action
make
that
the
would require
call to
oral
do the oral
consultation.
consultation.
Correct.
Okay.
I don't know if we need to add this, but I believe this is a best practice for patient safety.
Yeah, I just don't want a pharmacy to provide a monograph and be out of compliance with this section.
Correct. And then if I'm picking up my neighbor prescription, I don't want to see the, oh, you have, I only know this medication and now
Yeah. This interferes with your whatever medication that I shouldn't know about. Yeah, I got you.
All right, the neighbor shouldn't ask you to pick up his medication if he doesn't want
don't-
you to know what he's on.
Don't talk to me.
You would assume to be the agent of the patient if that were the case.
Yeah,
Sure.
but I would just,
Nonetheless. Okay, just wanted to make sure we're good. That's fine.
but just to clear, so it's not specific, it is just general drug or drug interaction, not specific to a patient.
That's fine. Yeah.
And Kristen, your request was to change the header and add consultation, right?
Yeah. Well, I don't know that the other titles need to be there, just consultation and take out. Because now,
Yeah, I like it.
Do you want to call it consultation? Do you want to do prescription counseling?
I like that better.
okay,
I don't know, consultation sounds like it's in person.
and how are we making, how are we making it clear that that includes written? Do you feel like it's clear here, or are we putting it in a definition somewhere? Because that's what I think the piece.
I
we're
think
gonna
we
have
need
to-
I think we need a
see.
definition. I think we need a definition at the beginning of this. Prescription counseling is blah 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 blah.
Mhm.
Prescription counseling includes written information,
Oral or written, yeah.
or other means of interactive communication. I don't know.
Well,
I'm
let's actually go
thinking
down
like a
to
video.
C. Shouldn't we just change C to prescription consultation and a minimum shall include, and then it's all, then you're actually saying what it is? It's just C.
But can we need, I think what Kristen's trying to say is, do we need to be explicit that written
Includes
materials are sufficient and appropriate? But like, for example, maybe a video was also appropriate, right? So I don't know that it needs to be written. If I recorded a video specific to your diabetes machine or whatever, like, wouldn't that be appropriate? If it gave all that information, I think it should be.
I've seen Lovenox send out videos.
A lot of those are going to be way better than they would ever get in a community pharmacy, and then they could follow up with questions.
Cam, is at the beginning of the
So-
rules of the statutes, is there a definition of counseling?
Let me pull it up.
I just can't remember.
I can't remember either, Roger. Good question.
Nope.
No, there isn't.
Could we, though, just have that information under B, where you put only a pharmacist, graduate intern, or pharmacy intern shall provide counseling to the patient? And then you could say something instead of ensure that a process is in place, that process would be, we would say something as to written video and make that more, that explanation right there of what consultation is.
Should B have the people listed? Because if you're providing written materials, is that a person that's providing the counseling? I don't know, maybe I'm getting into semantics here.
See, I was thinking that that means that's the oral consultation occurring by a pharmacist or graduate intern or a pharmacy intern is providing oral consultation. But then the other process in place would be the definition of written or technology based.
You just
Yeah.
say a pharmacy shall provide counseling to the patient instead of the people.
Does that include technician, registrant, and technician?
About counseling shall be provided to the patient or ensure that a process is in place for the patient to receive counseling. That way it takes out the people.
But then I think if we talk about oral consultation, we do still need to talk about who can perform that if we remove that
On
up there.
2, it says.
Correct.
On 2, it says the pharmacist, through the exercise of professional judgment, determines.
But I still think we should allow an intern or a graduate intern to perform the counseling. It shouldn't have to be just done by a pharmacist because
Oh,
the
no,
interns
yeah,
need to
for
get
sure.
that experience.
But I think in B, we should take out the people there and just put counseling shall be provided. Can we take off the people in B? The whole first part of the sentence out. And then the next part that we added, just start with counseling shall be provided. The patient.
Yeah, that makes sense. I was gonna look and see. I think in the rules of an intern that we have that they could counsel, so maybe we don't need that there. And I think we have it as a prohibited duty for technicians. Does that sound right?
Hey, Kim, the last sentence in B, it probably should say counseling instead of the consultation.
Yeah, under delegated duties, we have it as excluded. You're right, for text. So we gotta fix that.
And the words the consultation can come out, yeah.
Cam, does that assume you'll just harmonize and look for it in other places, like the technicians being able to be delegated to counsel under this definition, which means provide written materials?
They wouldn't provide the written materials. That would come as a part of the dispensing process. I don't think it needs to be in the delegation rules.
I mean, like they can, under this definition, hand a written material to the patient, which is considered counseling under this.
No, giving materials is not counseling, right? Anyone should be able to.
I disagree. I don't think we need to change the delegation stuff. Let me look at the intern rule.
I made a note, Kristen, just for myself.
Yeah, so under R4 23402, it talks about only a pharmacist, graduate intern, or intern shall provide oral consultation about a prescription medication to a patient or
That's okay.
patient's caregiver.
We just changed that.
So we probably need a different, I don't know, does this need to be in a different place then? Because 402 is like the general
Duties of a
function.
pharmacist.
There's more than just counseling.
That's true. There's A and all that stuff. So
do we need to, I don't know, do we need to create a separate section for this and just strike the original language in 402?
Well, what else does it have beyond counseling?
Ability to receive written oral prescriptions, which technically maybe we need to rework this whole section, because that would be covered under the delegation piece. Talks about verify the legality and feasibility of dispensing a prescription based on the allergies and compatibilities, like verify that the dosage is within the proper, maybe I think we need to work more on this whole section and make it a little bit less specific.
next, I know we got
I
two
do
minutes.
think though that how we had it as oral counseling, or we had it as counseling, I think that should be its own section, because now like there's multiple people doing multiple things.
That's probably why we need to look at the entire 402 section, because
I think we need to look at the entire 402. I feel pretty good about where we're going with this, and I think this is the right way. I just think we need to look at it in its holistic, look at it holistically, and I think 402 is probably a little bit dated because of the delegation rules too. Like more than just a pharmacist can take an oral prescription now, according to the delegation rules.
Yeah.
Or an intern.
Right.
Well, I think we're at time. Anything else for the good of the order?
Well, we keep pushing Bina's agenda items back, so I may have to prioritize that next time, Madam Chair.
We'll discuss the first.
Okay, we can start. I agree. We'll start with hers next. I'll send you some dates for, do we want to look at May?
May's gonna be tight. We have conferences and
Yeah.
what's coming up on that month. So maybe latter part of May or early June.
Okay, I'll take a look and send you some potential dates to send out to the group today.
Okay. Truman, any last thoughts before and your team?
Yeah, I think Max and Ben had a quick concern just in regards to the name badges for does the task force want to consider how pharmacists should be addressed? We have it addressed in 1104 for technician names and trainee name and title, but nothing specifically about pharmacists. Is that going to be a moot point?
Let me add an asterisk since nothing is set in stone yet, but
Okay.
Name badges for pharmacists.
All right, thanks.
As we look at the entire section of 402, we can maybe move that somewhere else.
All right.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Cool.
Thanks, everyone.
Appreciate everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Here.